Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Joe Davidge. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. On behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, the DeKalb County Public Library, and the DeKalb Library Foundation, welcome to the award ceremony for the books all Georgians should read and the books all young Georgians should read. We call it an award ceremony. It's really not that. There are so many winners in this room already, and publishing a book and being part of the literary community in Georgia is an honor of itself. So we are really here to honor the work of 20+ authors and illustrators here this evening for their outstanding contribution to the Georgia literary community. I would like to quickly thank a few people if you are not over at the reception earlier. First of all, Allison Weisinger. She is the director of DeKalb County Public Libraries. She gives us our home here in the state of Georgia. We are part of the National Center for the Book at the Library of Congress and are their representatives here. But our home is upstairs on the 3rd floor, and we can think of no better place than being part of one of the best library systems in the state of Georgia. So thank you, Allison Weisinger. Over here this evening, Jill Joplin. She is the executive director of the DeKalb Library Foundation, and they do so much work for literacy in DeKalb County, whether it is our English as a second language programs, putting books on the shelves when sometimes the budget isn't exactly full enough, working in shelters, working in clinics to make sure that young people have access to books is this lady's job, and she does a fantastic job of it, and we are humbled and thankful to be a part of the DeKalb Library Foundation. Julia Jones, who is a member of the Board of Trustees here at the DeKalb County Public Library. We thank her for their unbelievable guidance in steering our library system. We, of course, are part of the county, but our Board of Trustees makes sure that we are on the straight and narrow, and they are extremely helpful to us and in guiding us every step of the way, every day that we open our doors here to our patrons. So thank you, Julia. Helping us out and greeting us here this evening, of course, Amy Pila. She works in our reference department upstairs. So if you have ever called the library wanting to know the name of your congressman, if we have a book, or someone who had a hit song in 1981, you probably talked to Amy. She volunteered graciously to help out this evening. She has a background in events management, and she has been extremely helpful and supportive this evening. So thank you, Amy. Of course, the gentleman who shares my office, our program assistant, Zach Steele, he puts up with me and for some odd reason can read all of the notes and the pieces of paper that I not only leave on my desk, but the notes that I compose in my head and leave there. He somehow has the intuition to figure it all out. But thank you so much, Zach. We are proud to have you on board. So because it is a literary event, and every time we compile these lists, which are always difficult to do, we considered over 150 books this year, both for the adult list and the children's list. They were all amazing, and it's this exciting board meeting that we have where we actually formulate these lists and vote on these books. I will say, and I am sure many members of the Georgia Center for the Book Advisory Council, if you are here, advisory council members, please stand up. Thank you so much for helping me out over these past years. They know that I will put up a fight and go down in flames for poetry. Exactly, which is why we have 2 books of poetry on the list this year. But we have such a vibrant poetry community, not only in the state of Georgia, but here in Atlanta. We frequently have winners of slam competitions, world slam competitions, world poetry competitions, children's slams competitions, and it is just amazing the work that they produce. Tonight, of course, we are honoring 2 books of poetry, and we have 2 poets whose work are featured in the anthology that we will honor this evening. First this evening is Julie Blomeke. whose poetry manuscript, Slide to Unlock, recently placed as a semifinalist in 3 book prizes: the 2015 Hudson Prize, the 2015 Washington Prize, and the 2014 Crab Orchard Poetry Series First Book Award. She is a graduate of Bennington Writing Seminars, and in 2015, she was a fellow at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Drunken Beat, Poet Lore, and The Great Anthology. In May, she won the 2015 Ekphrastic Poetry Competition at the Toledo Museum of Art, where her work will be on view with Claude Monet until September. Will you please welcome Ms. Julie Blomeke.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, books. Thank you, each of you that has come here tonight to celebrate with us the craft of words. I have to confess, I feel a little bit fraudulent because I'm born and raised in the North, but I have 2 secrets. The first is that I've lived in the South for almost 2 decades now, which I hope offers me a little bit of collateral. And the second is that I was one of the last students to be taught by the incomparable poet, James Dickey. Though Dickey is often remembered for his twist of Southern darkness, as Leon Stokes-Perry writes in the introduction to the Southern Poetry Anthology, his legacy as a teacher is often overlooked. In the classroom, he was a Zen master of words and energy, a man who believed in the power of coincidence and synchronicity as divine language, in the bravery of authentic and new voices in poetry, a teacher brazen enough to declare that poets, in their pursuit of finding the inspired in the uninspired, of penetrating to the essence of the thing, were indeed masters of the superior secret in poetry and in life. A tall order. This anthology holds secrets and tall tales, omens and signs, ginkgo and tupelo, tobacco and sapelo, wild turkey and cottonmouth. It would have heartened and thrilled James Dickey to see the work and vision of William Wright in gathering these voices into our hands. I am honored tonight to be reading a poem that would not have been without James Dickey. His love of the wristwatch and the sextant were part of my inspiration. It was a poem that later became one of the driving impetus for my entire poetry manuscript. This is Clockwork. Because it enters the body in sleep, this thought of hands, of face, this idea we must make round, this ticking cycle of weight. Because with only the cells and organs awake, it buys a new house, enters in. Because the words begin as anxious thought. When? Because the heart can't help but anticipate. The lonely mind can't help but be young, yearning for embrace, too shy to ask. Because the soul needs it, or this is what the thought says, when really it is all poetry, the want, the weight, the acceptance of hands.
So now just a few quick words of advice before we begin handing these lovely trophies. They are quite heavy. They are heavier than they look. So they're about 3¼ pounds apiece, just so you know if you're receiving one this evening. And also, before you leave, please make sure we give you the lovely presentation box that goes along with it. They will safeguard until you get home. After that, they are no longer my responsibility. So in the box, out of the building, they're all yours. Thank you very much. So let's begin this evening. Slightly out of order, but it gives me the wonderful opportunity to quote a man who has been on the list before, Terry Kay, who gives wonderful words of advice through emails. And he said on this stage once that there are about 3 authors in Georgia that actually can make a living just writing books, and he's not one of them. So authors do have day jobs. A lot of the authors here have day jobs. And this particular author does, Tara Alon McVoy. She, of course, works at Little Shop of Stories and works with the Decatur Book Festival. She has been a friend and a constant source of inspiration to myself and writes lovely books about fiction with an unbelievable eye to the struggles and the trials of our young people today. All of her characters literally leap off the page, and I've been in love with her books since the first one, whether there are candy hearts or bullets on the cover. She is absolutely amazing. So on our list this year for 2015, Tara Alon McVoy for Being Friends with Boys. So our first book that we're honoring as a book that all Georgians should read in 2015 is Those Bones Are Not My Child by Toni Cade Bambara. Toni, of course, passed away 30 years ago in 1995. And although she was born in Brooklyn, New York City, she moved to Atlanta, Georgia with her daughter, Karma Blue. This novel, of course, was published posthumously in 1999. And it is about the Atlanta child murders that took place between 1979 and 1981. It was edited by Toni Morrison, who called this book Bambara's masterpiece, and we are so pleased to have it on our list. Next, Suffer and Grow Strong by Carolyn Newton Curry began as, of course, her dissertation, like many of our books of nonfiction began this year that we considered. Ella Gertrude Clanton Thomas was a young woman living in Augusta, Georgia, and these are culled from her journals, multiple volumes that she wrote pre, during, and post-Civil War. It is about the personal struggles of this young lady as she lived in the South and, of course, realized that slavery was not something that could be tolerated. So please join me in honoring this evening Carolyn Curry. Next, moving about the state to the Georgia coast, Untamed, the Wildest Woman in America and the Fight for Cumberland Island, is the story of a lady who is affectionately called, or maybe unaffectionately called, Carrion Carroll, who is a self-taught scientist and defender of sea turtles. She has been known to maybe take dips in the moonlight off Cumberland Island, maybe not wearing all that she should. She has also been known to hunt and field dress boar on the beach. However, we know that Cumberland Island is a special jewel in the state of Georgia, and we know that it needs to be protected. And we know that the arguments between the heirs of the estates and the National Park Service and Carrion Carroll will come some resolution when they all come to the table. But that story is told this evening by Will Harlan, and we would like to honor him as a book that all Georgians should read for his nonfiction book, Untamed. On to Middle Georgia. Sean Hill's book of poetry, Blood Ties and Brown Liquor, is a series of poems that chronicle the fictional family of a man named Silas Wright, moving from the time of slavery to the Great Depression to the Jim Crow era It tells about their struggles. It is an amazing book of poetry that moves from the slavery times when a slave won his freedom by pulling the burning tiles off the state capitol in Milledgeville to save it, because he believed in government, even though the government did not believe he was a person. Unfortunately, Sean Hill is not here tonight. He, although from Milledgeville, teaches in Alaska. I'm sure it is a lot cooler there, and maybe they don't get as much rain, but we will be sending Sean his award with our thanks and appreciation for all of his work. A new collection by Mary Hood. It's been long awaited. She is a Lillian Smith Book Award winner, and we thank Anna Schachner, who is the editor of the Chattahoochee Review. We present the Lillian Smith Book Awards and the Townsend Prize with Anna every year. And she has also won the Townsend. She has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and I think everyone here may have an old copy of When Venus is Blue that someone needs to sign before she leaves the building this evening. The collection this evening starts with a story of a Latino woman who decides to assassinate a mass murderer, and ends with the story of a group of women who work in a factory sewing camouflage for members of the armed forces in Afghanistan. I am just thrilled that the book has been newly published by the University of South Carolina Press, because we get to be the first medallion that's on the cover of that book, because I am sure there are going to be many to follow. So will you please join me in honoring Mary Hood. Next, T. Geronimo Johnson's Welcome to Braggsville. Like many of our authors this evening, although Nino grew up in the Buckhead area and lived here for 20 years, he is teaching elsewhere. So he is handing out syllabi, and I'm sure making many MFA students sweat right about now. But Welcome to Braggsville is the story of a young man who grew up in a small town who moves to Atlanta to go to college, and decides to take a group of his friends back to his small hometown in Georgia, a hometown where they still celebrate Confederate Appreciation Day, and has to explain this somehow to his friends, because he finds himself suddenly outgrowing the town that he grew up in. So please join me in honoring Welcome to Braggsville by T. Geronimo Johnson. Another professor who is not here with us tonight, Taya Miles, has written a book, The Cherokee Rose, a novel of gardens and ghosts. Taya began her work writing nonfiction with a book called The Diamond Hill Plantation, which is actually about slave-holding Cherokees here in Georgia. This book is a fictional telling of that story, told from 4 different perspectives. It is an absolutely lovely book that has been recently published, and I encourage us all to read it, because like many times in history, small details fall through the cracks, and we have to keep discussing these details in order for us to grow as people. So will you please join me in honoring The Cherokee Rose by Taya Miles. There is no one who looms larger on the Georgia literary landscape than Flannery O'Connor. She has been many authors' inspiration, and we are honored this evening that a book has been published where we get her own words, because much has been written about Flannery O'Connor's religiosity and her devotion to Catholicism. A prayer journal by Flannery O'Connor, which was made possible by the Mary Flannery O'Connor Charitable Trust, comes from her journal when she was in Iowa, from 1946 to 1947. Of course, it is filled with Flannery O'Connor's wisdom and her wit, and what makes it so special is that at the end of this book, you have a facsimile of that sterling notebook written in her own hand. But since Flannery O'Connor is not here, a bit of her wisdom from January 2nd, 1947 says, "No one can be an atheist who does not know all things. Only God is an atheist. The devil is the greatest believer. and he has his reasons. Accepting the award tonight is a personal friend of Flannery O'Connor's and a professor at Georgia State University, William Sessions. Also accepting the award for Flannery O'Connor is Elizabeth Wiley from Andalusia. And if you have not been to Flannery O'Connor's home in Milledgeville, I do encourage you all to go there just to sit on that gorgeous porch. So will you please join me in honoring William Sessions and Elizabeth Wiley. Lewis Wade Sullivan is an active health policy leader, minority health advocate, author, physician, and educator. He served as the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services during President George H.W. Bush's administration and is the founding dean of the Morehouse School of Medicine. This evening, we honor Dr. Sullivan for his book, Breaking Ground, My Life in Medicine. William Wright is the editor of the Southern Anthology, Volume 5, Georgia. He isn't here this evening, but we are pleased to have two of the poets that are included in this volume here. One, Julie Blomeke, you heard her read earlier, and Rupert Feige, you will hear him read later. If you are a student of poetry or as someone who wants to dip your toe in the pond of poetry, this is a wonderful volume that has poets from all over our state, from experimental types of poetry, haiku, short verse, long form. This is something to pick up and truly treasure. So I encourage you all to charge right on out there and grab one of those off that table, pay for it. That would be a good thing. Or when the library is open, feel free to go upstairs and check one of the volumes out, and you can do that. But please join me this evening in honoring William Wright for editing the Southern Anthology of Poetry. Now on to a little bit of something more fun, the children's list. So the 2015 books all young Georgians should read. This is, of course, includes a smattering of picture books, nonfiction books, fiction books, books for young adult, and it truly shows not only the depth of children's authors and illustrators that we have working here in Georgia, but many of these books have also won major national awards or have been nominated for major national awards, and we are just so honored that these people are here tonight with us. So, first out of the gate, Elizabeth DeLemba for Bird on Water Street. Elizabeth right now took a very wonderful job and is working in Edinburgh, Scotland. So we will somehow be getting a trophy to her. But she was part of the Georgia Center for the Book Advisory Council. She is the person that we have to thank for the list of books all young Georgians should read, because she was the advocate for this list for many years and was the person who put the first list of books all Georgians should read together back in 2010. This book, I remember Elizabeth telling me about it way back in the day at a lunch, somewhere in 2006 or 2008. And we have a kinship about this book because it is about the effects of the mining industry on our natural environment. And the whole plot of this book revolves around a bird that somehow in this lunar landscape of Coppertown that has been devastated by the copper mining industry, a bird has alighted on the branch of a scraggly, dying tree. And the town goes wild because even though that this takes place in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, there has been no flora or fauna in Coppertown for as long as anyone can remember. So please join me in honoring Elizabeth DeLemba. Kelly Bingham for Circle Square Moose. Moose is back. This is the sequel. And actually, Moose is here this evening. So before you all leave, please take a picture with Moose. I already have a picture with Moose. But Moose interjects himself into this book because apparently Moose, not just the moose, but moose in general, plural. This is a great book for that whole plural collective noun thing for children, by the way. Moose like shapes and colors, and he is just so thrilled to find himself next to his friend Zebra. And of course, Zebra has to set everything to right because Moose just happens to jumble everything up. So will you please join me in honoring Kelly Bingham. Our Gregory Christie has a tiny little gallery and shop right in North DeKalb Mall where he teaches art lessons. And in the meantime, he does some amazing illustration for books that have won Coretta Scott King Awards, NAACP Awards, and many, many others. Tonight, we're honoring him for Philip Reed Saves the Statue of Freedom, which is a story about a South Carolinian gentleman and the Statue of Freedom that sits atop the U.S. Congress building. I encourage you all to pick up his books. They are amazing pieces of art, and if you feel like picking up a paintbrush and throwing some stuff on a canvas at North DeKalb Mall, run right on over there. It is always exciting and always colorful and always full of people and laughter. So will you please join me in honoring R. Gregory Christie. Now that school is in session, everyone has, of course, supply lists, classroom supply lists, uniform lists, bedtimes, and all of those things contend with. And some people eventually will have to contend with shepherding class pets. This is a wonderful book in a series of books by Susan Nace. It is Missy's Super Duper Royal Deluxe Class Pets. It is a lovely novel for young readers, and I encourage you all to pick it up. She is the author and illustrator of this work. Please join me in honoring Susan Nace. Peter Andrew Solomon for All Those Broken Angels. Unfortunately, Peter had an emergency and could not be here tonight, but wanted to. And he was on our list last year for his novel, Henry Franks. And he writes young adult novels that are on the cusp of adult novels. They're gritty and they tackle sometimes very hard subject matter. But we all know that children in our state sometimes live in hard environments, and they live in hard households. And this particular book is about Richard Harrison, whose best friend disappeared when she was 6. Sadly, that's all I can tell you about the book, because if I told you any more, I'd give it away. But it is an amazing piece of work, and we are so happy that Peter keeps producing these wonderful novels that are a little more gritty than they should be, but recognizing that sometimes life is gritty for everyone. So, Peter Andrew Solomon. Okay, these folks are Google impervious, okay? Frank and Connie Morrison, I Googled and Googled and Googled and could not. 7:22 is the timestamp on this picture, ladies and gentlemen. And I am so thankful that they showed up to where I could take this picture. But Frank is an amazing artist. His wife Connie has written the words for this book, and you will clap, stomp, shake, and tap to I Got the Rhythm. And hopefully you can find that rhythm in each and every one of you all. So will you please join me in honoring Frank and Connie Morrison. Laurel Slider actually is another transport from Baltimore. But we are glad to have her here for her book, Bigger Than a Bread Box. This is the story of a young girl named Rebecca who moves from Baltimore with her mother after her mother divorces to live in Atlanta, Georgia with her grandmother. And a child of magic and enjoying mystery finds a bread box in her grandmother's attic that can grant wishes. However, the only wish it cannot grant is the power for her to restore her family. But she realizes, oh. Yeah, we're going to edit this out. Thank you, DCTV. But in a wonderful way to teach children, she realizes everything that she receives in this magical box comes from somewhere else. So, thank you, Laurel. Okay, well, I made it that far in the ceremony, so I'm kind of glad, you know. It happens, it happens, you know. We love books, we love libraries, we get a little emotional. It's perfectly okay. So next, Deborah Wiles for her novel Revolution, which is the second in the 60s trilogy. This is a documentary novel, and what's so interesting about it, and in weaving the plot of the story of this young girl who has to deal with the civil rights movement all of a sudden invading her town and these people wanting to register people to vote. You have these bits of newsreel-like footage, these photographs and these quotes from the Beatles invasion to what's going on in Laos and Vietnam. Unlike Mary Hood, I am sad to say that we do not get to be the first medallion on this book. You'll see the medallion that's on there, and for a good reason. But I think that in a year where we're celebrating so many things with the civil rights movement, that this is a perfect book to have on this list. And I am so pleased that we can honor this evening Deborah Wiles. Co-authored by Andrew Aden and illustrated by Nate Powell. March Book 2 is, of course, a graphic novel, and is the second time a graphic novel has appeared on our list. And it is written by and about the life story of John Lewis. Beginning in 1960 with his first visit to Washington, D.C., and then moving through all of the struggles from 61 to 63, and ending with the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. It's juxtaposed with Lewis appearing on the rostrum for the inauguration of Barack Obama. Twice. Dang it. I gotta get better at this. Twice, man. Anyway, we are so pleased this evening to have Congressman John Lewis here present to accept the honor for March Book 2. Because any good MC knows that when to surrender the microphone, because you've got much better speakers in the audience. So this evening, we are going to close with another poem by Rupert Fike that appears in the Southern Anthology of Poetry. And it's called First Memory, Grandfather's Cabin. And then closing out this evening, because I don't have anything better, will be Congressman John Lewis. So please at this time welcome Mr. Rupert Fike.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, well, I'm just going to, the slight background to this story is that I was raised in a small Georgia town by the name of Virginia Highland. One of my first jobs was running up to tell my father that dinner was ready, and I would have to go get him out of Moe's and Joe's. It's like in the 1950s. So we were with that great Southern, I don't know, it's a cliche or trope. We were the fallen Southern family, because my grandfather had been a famous doctor. But my grandmother and my aunts, they kept telling me what a great family we were, and we had a beautiful place in the mountains, and they were going to show it to me. And the one time we went there, when they finally showed it to me, it had been trashed. And this is first memory, grandfather's cabin. And I ran out with my wife's sequin glasses. I'm secure, right? First memory, grandfather's cabin. My great aunt shuffled through the rubble, their black pocketbooks close at the ready. They took the dining room table, walls. They broke every window, Lord have mercy. They tore out the walnut shelves. I am 6, confused. Who are they? The outhouse is horrifying enough for a child mostly reared by these women, Edwardian holdouts. My grandmother, the one sister to marry and endure sex and go to France with her med school husband, who, after studying with Madame Curie, zapped so many tumors in the New South, he was able to buy this mountain acre in these rooms that must have once been not broken. But Pop is dead now, gone on, that's what they always say. His beloved place on its own slow slide, his wife and her sisters helpless, appalled, an increasingly favorite word, from confronting the low side of life. They had been raised in Knoxville, those summer nights that James A.G. preserved for all time. Their world had been filled by manners, honor. Reading headlines from unbought newspapers was, I was taught, the same as stealing. And now this, senseless meanness. Their best family rooms have been trashed, debauched by Rabun County folk, likely the same locals Dickey would draft to police the wild river down 2 hills. The likes of us, Atlanta people, a family fresh out of sober men. My father will have to sell all this for bar notes. I am the last great hope, only I'm too late. I'm little more than a dress-up doll for them. The world is changing. My aunts will soon die the way we all do when days first go strange, then beyond redemption, closing time. The century is half spent. So much is too late. Atoms have been split and radiation has been spilt beyond all recall, loosed, even here, into innocent June bugs and dust motes, caught in this haze over War Woman Dell. Thank you.
The best 5 words that I get to say. Please welcome Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you very much for this great honor. I want to thank each and every one of you and congratulate all of you who've been honored tonight. Now, I didn't grow up here in Georgia. I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was only 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, my father had saved $300, and a man sold him 110 acres of land. We still own the land today. On this farm, we raised a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chickens. On the farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens, and I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chickens. Dr. Sullivan had heard me tell the story. As a young boy, I wanted to be a minister. So in March, book 1, we tell the story that I would gather all of our chickens together, I won't bore you with it, in the chicken yard. My brothers and sisters and cousins would gather outside of the chicken yard, but along with the chicken, they have make up the audience, the congregation. And I would start speaking or preaching, and when I look back on it, some of the chicken would shake their heads or bow their head. These chickens never said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I preached to during the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. As a matter of fact, some of those chickens were just a little more productive. At least they produced 8. But in March, book 1, we tell the story of my growing up. That in 1956, when I was 16 years old with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library trying to get library cards, trying to check out some books. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for coloreds. I never went back to that library in the little town of Troy, Alabama, until July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my first book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of blacks and white citizens showed up. At the end of the program, they gave me a library card. So as a young student, I fell in love with books. I had a teacher who told me over and over again, read my child, read my child. And I tried to read everything. And I remember 50 years ago, this year, when I was leading with Jose Williams that first march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I had a backpack before it became fashionable to wear backpacks. And in this backpack, I had 2 books. We were going to be arrested and go to jail. I wanted to have something to read. Like Jefferson said, I cannot live without books. In book 2, we tell the story of going to Washington in 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, to go on the Freedom Ride. There's a lot of drama, where Andrew Iden, my co-writer, Nate Powell, graphic artist. Nate is so good. He make the words sing. And so many young people, especially young children, not just elementary, middle school, but high school and college students all over America reading the book. And I remember being at a book signing in San Diego, California, and one little girl about 4 years old said to me, she said, "Congressman, why are you so awesome?" And I didn't know what to say. I just said I tried to do what is right, what is fair, and what is just. We're inspiring another generation of young people to find a way to get in the way. Because my mother, my father, my grandparents told me, don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. Our young people need to know the story of our history, our struggle to redeem the soul of America and create one America. Because we all are one people who live in the same house, the American house, the world house. Thank you for honoring me tonight.
I told you I know better than to follow that. So we are going to retire to the book signing. So if all of the authors head on over to the meeting room just as soon as you can, go outside. Acapella Books is here this evening. They are our book vendor. Buy a book for yourself, buy a book for someone, buy a book and donate it to a library. But most of all, just enjoy the books for what they are. I thank you all so very much for coming, and we will see you again in 2016. Have a safe trip home.